So, I was looking through Twitter when I noticed that a certain top Fox player from Sweden was talking negatively about my main Jigglypuff. Of course, I'm talking about Pipsqueak, who at 11:22 AM, February 1st, 2022, uttered, "Jigglypuff can't be a cool character." Just as I was about to release my 7-hour long video evidence of Pip, I noticed that he had actually written a little bit more. She's essentially a balloon and flies through the intake of hot air plus pressure. Now you might say she becomes cool when grounded, but when you consider that she can instantly take flight again, it becomes pretty obvious that she stays at high temperatures. But is that really true? Is Puff really a cool character? Let's find out. So to figure out the temperature that Puff needs to be, we first need to figure out the gravitational force, how much something's dragged down, but also the buoyancy force, how much it's pushed up by the air. So to figure out the gravitational force, it's pretty simple. We just need the mass and the gravitational pull from the planet. So doing some quick googling, I found that Puff weighs 5.5 kilograms, and I'm just gonna assume this is Puff's mass as well. So that means Puff is pulled down with about 54 newtons of power. So to figure out the buoyant force, we need the air density, the acceleration due to gravity, and then the volume of Puff. So doing some quick googling again, I found that the diameter of Puff is 50.8 centimeters. After doing some quick math, we can find that Puff is about 0.0686 cubic meters big. So let's assume the density of air is the same as on Earth, 1.225 kilograms per cubic meter, and also that the gravity is the same. So you might be wondering, where does the temperature and the gas get into this? That's what we're trying to figure out. Well, let's just start off by ignoring that, because yeah, we'll run into a problem pretty soon. So if we do the calculations, we find that yeah, this is not good. We need the right number to be bigger than the left number, and that's gonna be a problem. Puff is less like a balloon and more like a rock. Considering how much Puff weighs and how small Puff is, we can pretty much ignore the air inside of Puff when making the calculations, because it's so meaningless. But I actually came to think about something when writing this, and that is that Puff actually grows and expands when jumping. Doing some pixel calculation and shit, we can figure out that Puff's actual jump volume is closer to 0.26 cubic meters, which is a lot better. That's a lot bigger when Puff is jumping and expanding compared to when she's just standing on the ground. So let's just quickly redo all the calculations and check again, and no. Okay, yeah, it's still not even close. Okay, so let's go back to the equation. So what this means is that one of our assumptions is false. Either Puff is not floating using hot air, or the gravity is not the same as on Earth, or the atmosphere is not made out of air, and finally, this might be a video game, and it doesn't necessarily have to follow our laws of physics. This video is a waste of time and doesn't even deserve to be called a shit, but let's look at the first point. So the fact of the matter is that there is no gas in our universe, no matter the temperature or the density, that would be able to lift Puff. As I stated earlier, there is quite a lot of difference between Puff and a balloon. Balloons usually weigh around 1 to 5 grams, which is roughly 1,000 times less than Puff. As I said earlier, even if Puff was floating using some imaginary, no density but not vacuum gas, the lowest we can bring their gravity is to 5.5 kilograms times the gravitation. We cannot change that any lower, that's just how it is. Okay, so changing what Puff uses to float doesn't change much, so let's look at the gravity instead. Well, here's the second problem. Gravity affects both how much Puff is pulled down and how much Puff is pulled up, so it just cancels out. And this only works assuming that Puff doesn't use their legs to gain height in any way, which is easily provable since Puff is able to jump mid-air. Since we are completely sure that we know the volume, the final factor that we might be able to change is the density of the surrounding gas. So for Puff to be able to lift, the atmosphere needs to have a density of at least 20.5 kilograms per meter cube. but preferably a bit denser, since we actually need to account for the weight of whatever is inside of puff as well. So after doing some in-depth research, I found that there is no gas able to lift puff. But what if the answer is not more gas, but less gas? You see, puff expels gas when she jumps, which is also able to generate upwards movement. The problem is that the upwards force from expelling the air is equal to mass times acceleration. And in case you didn't know, air doesn't have a lot of mass. So for the calculations to be somewhat feasible, puff needs to expel all the air inside of them. So if we do some calculations, we find that the acceleration needed is around 65 meters per second, which is a lot, but I think it might be feasible as long as puff is made out of pure muscle. Wait, what are we doing? What was the original question? Is puff a cool character? Well, considering a sphere is literally the best shape if you want to maximize volume and minimize surface area, basically make an object as hot as possible, and puff is made out of basically only muscle, we can conclude that puff is most likely not a cool character. Of course, there are some possible exceptions, like this for example. Okay, bye bye.